started out growing up in Detroit, and by the age of about 5, my family moved to Livonia, and we're pretty much a middle-class family. My father was an accountant at the time, and my mother a typical housewife. As I grew up, there was a lot of tension in the home. My mother and father seemed like they did a lot of fighting. I can remember my older brother and older sister, the three of us, before the others were born, and being in a corner of a bedroom just crying together because mom and dad were out fighting in the other room. Later found out my father was an alcoholic, and that was a lot of the reason I think that there was a lot of tension. I can remember my father getting in many accidents. I can remember a camping trip getting canceled because he hit a tree. I was really looking forward to a nice fishing trip, and I can remember being pretty upset about that. I can remember him being without cars and without his license. He was having an affair with another woman. It wasn't too long after that that I found out that my mom and dad were getting a divorce. I was just a kid growing up, and a lot of it I wasn't really paying much attention to until the day my mother had her stuff packed up and drove away. She moved back to Detroit where her mother lived, my grandmother. My oldest sister was basically put in charge of taking care of us. It was a heavy load put on her because my dad, he'd hardly ever be there. He was either at work, at his girlfriend's house. He'd come home in the morning, clean up, and go back to work. We basically fended for ourselves. I'd learned how to wash clothes at an early age in junior high school. When I think about it, 7th grade or so is pretty early to be in charge of getting your own laundry so that you can have something to wear to school. My mother was in and out of mental hospitals. I can remember visiting one time at Grandma's, and it was a dark, dungy room. She had a real low light on, sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee and smoking the cigarettes and really just staring into space. By the time I got into junior high school, I discovered alcohol. The first time I got drunk, we were drinking beer through straws and running from one end of the basement to the other against a paneled wall and crashing into it and dropping. I was a very quiet, reserved type of young boy. But I found that this alcohol could help me talk to girls, talk to other people. I was happy when I drank. I was always into sports. I was in Little League football, basketball, baseball. I was a springboard diver in high school. When I was early high school, maybe 10th grade, I can remember getting a phone call, and it was my grandmother. She actually told me that my mother had left the home and left a letter. The letter basically told my grandmother that she didn't want to be alone anymore. In essence, she was reading me my mother's suicide letter. I didn't know quite what to do, I was scared. I found out later that my mother was found in a lavatory in Edward Hines Park. She had overdosed from drugs. At that age, it's a really hard thing to go through. In some ways, I'm basically blaming myself. Maybe there's something I could have done to keep her alive. I think there's an early part of my codependency. I really struggled with trying to please people. I tried going to community college, and I think I got a total of 11 credits a whole year. So at the age of 19, a couple buddies convinced me to go into the Navy with them. In the meantime, my father had married the woman he had an affair with, and things between all of us wasn't very good. The best thing for me was to get out of the house and follow my friends. Unfortunately, overseas, there's drugs over there just like there is here, and 2 times I got busted with marijuana while I was in the Navy. When I was 22 years old, right after I got out of the service, my father died of cancer. He woke up one morning with pains in his stomach. It was a matter of 3 months and he was gone. I wanted to go to school, try to better myself. By then I was married. I had 2 girls. I had a hard time staying awake in the evenings trying to study after a full day of work. Went to a party at one point and was introduced to cocaine. I found that the cocaine was a very good way of staying awake while I was studying. Eventually I got my degree, but at the same time My drinking, my pot using, cocaine habit grew. I was doing things in my life that I thought I never would do. Some buddies of mine, we went out doing some cocaine at the bar, and there was a woman in the bar that just somehow ended up sitting next to us. And at the end of that evening, she ended up needing a ride home, and I volunteered to take her home, not thinking about anything. She made a sexual advance towards me, and I didn't resist it. I didn't expect it, but I didn't resist it. I had an adulterous affair with this woman. Eventually, because of that affair, I left a 6-month-old girl and a 3-year-old girl and my wife. I often said I wasn't going to be like my dad, and as it turned out, I became just like him. That woman was a severe alcoholic to the point I couldn't even imagine. I became very stressed out. At the same time, dealing more coke, buying more quantities, bigger quantities. I eventually hit her and I abused her physically. My anger would turn to rage, and it would be uncontrollable. Thank God I never injured her seriously, but there was a lot of abuse that went on. I had an episode with my girlfriend. She ended up leaving the home, and the next thing I knew, there was about 3 police officers barging into my bedroom with guns drawn, pointing them at me. They arrested me for felonious assault with intent to do great bodily harm, less than murder. She had also told them that I was dealing cocaine. They were able to get a search warrant, come into my home. Here I am now in jail. As it turns out, that was one of the best things that ever happened to me in my life. When I was in the jail cell, there's a library cart that goes by, and I grabbed this book, and the name of it was They Called Me the Catch Me Killer. As I read this book, I found out that this guy was a special forces agent in Vietnam, came home, became a police officer, ended up killing one woman and almost another. He'd kind of taunt the police, catch me if you can. Well, eventually they caught him. They put him in prison, and the story tells his life through prison. And this man gave his heart to Jesus Christ. I saw a true miracle of this man, his whole story. And after reading that book, I talked to the Lord. And when I was in the jail cell, I asked Jesus, I said, you know, if you can do that with this man's life, well, I can't imagine what you can do with mine. And I asked Jesus into my heart. And within a couple of days, I was a free man out of jail. I was released on bond, awaiting trial and sentencing for the cocaine charges. As a result of the court, I wasn't supposed to see my girlfriend. And eventually one day my girlfriend called me and wanted me to come and see her. It was the hardest thing for me to do, to stay away from this woman. I basically beckoned her call. So one time when my girlfriend called me over to this motel, it had snowed that day, and I saw footprints coming out the door. It looked like a man's footprints. So I got kind of suspicious of what was going on, and so I just went back to my apartment, and that evening there was a knock on my door, and I opened the door and it was the police. My girlfriend must have reported that I had contact with her, which violated my release conditions. And they immediately arrested me and took me across the street. I lived right across the street from the county jail. That time a chaplain had come through, and I requested a Bible from him. So I started studying through that. And for 2 months in that jail cell, I started reading books. I started studying the Word of God, and then I was sentenced. I brought a scripture with me, and I had it sitting in front of me, and it says, "For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind." Because I was very, very scared. Of course, I mentioned the word God as I testified to the judge, and I felt that my God was with me and that He would help me through this. And He kind of mocked God, I remember, and sentenced me to 1.5 years in prison. I was pretty scared because There you're in the entire population, whether it be serious criminals or people that are in prison for alcohol, for drunk driving. I was one of the fortunate ones, and I got put onto a work crew that was right there in Jackson. I went through a couple incidents where I felt like my life was in danger. I was punched in the face one time for just talking on the phone. I turned around and I told him, "God bless you, God save your soul." And he turned right around and walked away. And the next day, one of the guys that was in his room with him was on my work crew, and he said, "I don't know what you did to that man, Don, but he grabbed a Bible and he's studying it." And it wasn't more than a couple of days after that, the man came to me and asked me if I could show him what part of the Bible should I study and how should I study it. Something changed him as a result of that incident. So, getting punched in the face can be a blessing. I went through prison a year and a half and went back into life. Started going to AA, I was going to NA. I got a job and had to start almost all over again. And I've worked my way back up into a supervisory position. I found a church called Brighton Nazarene Church. With Celebrate Recovery, I'm a table leader, and I work with other people trying to just hear their story and give them encouragement. This is the least I can do, is to help others. In my heart, I can feel and I know what others go through. One of the things I always share with people is the hope that I have today. When I think of Jesus Christ in my life and what he's done for me, the big word for me is hope. Right now, my life's doing pretty good as a result of the changes I've made in my life. And I don't know how it can get any better. I found the Lord found me a wonderful wife. Her name is Linda, and she had 3 boys, and I had the 2 girls. I look at today and I think of the many blessings and how things really are, and the whole scope of things, and how me being sentenced to a year and a half of prison really saved my life and changed my life. Because I was in that jail cell, I picked up that book. I might never have ever picked up a book like that. And I never thought I could enjoy life the way I enjoy it. Before I had to have a drink to enjoy it. I had to have a line of Coke, I had to have smoke a joint. And today I enjoy life in a whole new way. And it's all because of Jesus. Oftentimes I ask, why do I deserve this, after everything that I've done in my life? That's really my story.